What if I told you the thing that destroyed my family wasn't some stranger in the night? It wasn't a shadowy criminal with a motive we could never understand. The person who set everything in motion sat at our kitchen table, laughed with me, and called me grandson. For decades, I carried that secret like a stone in my chest. I am 82 years old now, and the truth I'm about to tell you has been buried under half a century of silence, fear, and shame. People think memory gets kinder with age. It doesn't. Memory gets complicated. It hides little cuts, it sharpens certain edges, and it softens others, just enough to keep you pretending. And here's what they don't tell you. Secrets change their shape over time. They become stories people tell themselves to survive. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the night that split our family in two, the clues I kept to myself, and the single choice I made that still wakes me up at night. This isn't a neat mystery with an impartial detective. This is messy, this is personal, and it will force you to ask, when does loyalty become betrayal? And when does silence become a crime? But first, you need to understand one thing about memory. I was 82 when I finally decided to speak. I should say I was 82 when I could no longer hide the weight of the truth. Not because I wanted confession, not because I was absolved, because keeping it felt worse than letting it go. The first time I saw blood that night, I thought it would wash away with the rain. It did not. Listen. Pay attention. There are choices ahead that I will not try to justify. I will only tell you what happened. When I was a young man, my grandfather, my namesake, was a small-town man with large hands and a dangerous way of laughing. He had charm. He had stories. He also had enemies. I grew up watching him trade favors, keep accounts, and bury things behind false cupboards. We all knew he dealt in secrets. We smiled and called it wisdom. We carried on with our meals. The town had one main street, one bank, one newspaper, and too many debts. People owed him favors. People feared his ledger. There were whispers about a man who vanished one winter. There were arguments in the corner store. But life was life. We mended fences. We paid our respects at funerals. We pretended there were no unpaid accounts that could grow teeth. Then the night came. One spring when the air smelled like wet paper and cigarette smoke. My sister was 28. My uncle had returned from the city with new ties and careful eyes. The radio played a melancholy song. The house had 3 doors, but only 2 locks. I remember because I tightened the second lock that night. And I still don't know why I bothered. It started simple. A telegram, a visitor, and a question that should have been left unasked. My grandfather opened the door for a man I had never seen. He wore a hat pulled low. He introduced himself like a distant cousin. My grandfather invited him in, offered whiskey, and kept talking as if the world had not shifted. I watched him watch us. He had a way of placing a look on people that felt like an indictment. The visitor asked about a ledger. He asked where certain entries had gone. My grandfather laughed and pulled from the sideboard a cigarette tin, an old habit of his, and waved his hand as if the past were a rumor. But then he reached under the table, and my heart stopped once and then again. He slid a small leather book toward the man. The visitor's hand trembled when he took it. My grandfather put a palm on top of the book as if to reassure himself more than the man. Later, when they left, the visitor kissed my grandfather's cheek in a way that smelled of money and something else. Relief, perhaps. I remember thinking how simple it all seemed, how small the lie looked with whiskey on the side. 2 nights later, the man who had been missing for a year was found. They called it an accident, a slip on the riverbank, a tragic fall. He had been last seen arguing with a person who matched my grandfather's description. The town murmured, then settled into sorrow. The police wrote it off. My grandfather lit his pipe and told the story of the river's anger. We swallowed. But something in me did not swallow. I kept replaying the smile on the visitor's face. I kept thinking about the leather book. I kept asking myself not whether my grandfather could be responsible, but how deep the truth ran and what it would cost to pull on that thread. Years passed. The ledger disappeared from the sideboard. My sister married and had children. My uncle left for the city and called rarely. The town aged, and the river kept its quiet. I kept secrets the way other men kept watches, worn on the inside, hidden, but always there. Then came the day I found a photograph tucked behind a loose brick in the attic. It was the missing man, smiling in a way that made him look careless. Beside him stood my grandfather, arms slung around his shoulder, both of them too close, too friendly for comfort. On the back of the photo, someone had written a date in ink that did not match the timeline we had been given. That photograph was the first real crack in the House of Silence. It didn't scream. It whispered. It suggested there were versions of that night that had not been told, but I did not show it to anyone. Why? Because at that point, my loyalty to my name felt entangled with fear for what speaking might do to my family. I convinced myself that protecting my family meant protecting our lives. I look back now and see how convenient that illusion was. It kept me safe, and it kept others suspended in a grief that would never fully resolve. People ask me if I ever considered going to the police. I did. I went twice to the station. I sat under a single light that hummed like an exposed wire. I felt very small there. I tried to explain that the story did not add up. But truth is a clumsy thing when it faces the machinery of authority. Evidence had to be neat. Confessions had to be clean. My memory was a blur of cigarette smoke, distant laughter, and a ledger that might have meant nothing or everything. They thanked me for my time and told me to sleep on it. Sleep. A joke. I did not sleep for days. And then something happened that made this all worse. My sister collapsed at a market. At first, we thought it was a stroke. The doctors said it was stress. The truth was, she had a secret she could not carry either. In her handbag, the doctors found a note, only 6 words, but those 6 words were enough to reopen a wound. He promised to take care. Those words pointed at my grandfather the way a compass points north. The town's gossip rekindled like dry tinder. People came around with sympathetic eyes and mouths half open. They asked questions in ways that felt surgical. If I had been younger, braver, less bound by duty, I would have answered. I did not. I pushed the photograph back into the attic. I wrapped it in newspaper and stuffed it behind old sweaters. I told myself the past should remain the past. I thought our silence was mercy. Silence is never mercy. Silence is a slow rot. Years later, an investigator, young, impatient, and very certain, arrived in my town, tracing a thread that began in the city and led to our river. He laced his interviews with an arrogance that infuriated me. He spoke like the truth was a building he could walk into and catalog. He asked about my grandfather. He asked about payoffs. He asked about who benefited when a man vanished. I watched him. He assumed I would be loyal to the old ways. He assumed I'd protect the name. He was wrong. The investigator found the photograph under a floorboard. He asked one question. "Why did you hide this?" I had 100 justifications. I chose one answer instead. I told him I was protecting family. My voice was steady, but my hands were not. Then he told me something I had already been resisting, that protecting a family's reputation does not help a victim. It helps a perpetrator sleep. After that conversation, I did something I had not done in decades. I opened the ledger. The leather book was smaller than I imagined. Its pages were fine and smelled of other people's money. Entries were neat, with names, dates, and amounts. But there were also cross-references, notes in the margins, and an index that led to an address in the city. An address I had seen on my grandfather's desk long ago. I followed the address like someone following a line in a map. It led to a notary who kept records buried under old newspapers, and a woman who remembered my grandfather's laugh with a shiver. Names matched faces. Faces matched debts. What I thought was a local feud was a small machine of favors, threats, and quiet compulsion. I realized then that our town was only one spoke in a larger wheel. I stood at the edge of what I had protected my whole life. I could step forward and pull the wheel off its axis. I could present the ledger, the photograph, the testimony. Or I could fold everything back into the pocket of the past and let the river keep its secret. I chose to open my mouth. When I testified, I felt every age I had been folding in on me. I felt the boy who watched his grandfather charm a man, the young man who locked the second door, the husband who wanted his family safe, the father who decided to stay silent, and the grandfather who had to live with the consequences. I told the court about the ledger, about the photograph, about conversations I had heard in rooms where adults pretended not to be conspiring. I testified in a dry voice I didn't recognize. The town shook. Old alliances crumbled. People who had once dined at my grandfather's table refused to meet my eyes. My sister blamed me at first. She said I had reopened pain for no reason. My uncle stopped speaking to me. The town newspaper published my statements like evidence of betrayal. My name became a river of scorn. I thought I had to accept that as the cost of truth. Then, the legal machinery turned. Investigators dug into addresses in the city and uncovered transactions that traced back to the ledger. They found witnesses who had been too afraid to speak for years. They re-examined the supposed accident by the river. The case that had been closed reopened like a shutter. People were indicted. My grandfather's name, once spoken like a talisman, began to lose its power. What surprised me was not the downfall. It was how the town responded when the truth was out. Some people applauded. Some people mourned. Some people swore at me in grocery store aisles. But most of all, ordinary people told me they had been waiting for someone to say what I said. They had thought their doubts crazy. They had thought loyalty was the only honest thing left. Standing outside the courthouse, watching men in suits escorted away, I understood two things. One, silence is a tool that hurts more people than it protects. Two, truth is not always kind, but it is necessary. I am not naive enough to claim this story has a tidy moral. I still carry guilt. I still dream of the night the man died, the way the river looked like glass, the way a hat rolled in the mud. I still think about what might have been different if courage had come earlier. Could my sister have been saved from years of whispered worry? Could my uncle have kept his honor? Could my grandfather have turned himself in? Regret is a slow teacher. It tells you things you do not want to hear, but it also hands you a map. If there is a lesson I can give you, it is this. Loyalty to a person is sacred. Sometimes. Loyalty to a lie is a slow rot. When you protect a secret because you fear the fallout, ask yourself who benefits. Ask yourself if the cost will be paid by people who cannot defend themselves. Memories will betray you. They will soften details that make you uncomfortable and sharpen things that flatter you. If you are holding a secret that could hurt someone else, if you are weighing the cost of truth against the comfort of silence, listen to the part of you that feels heavy. That heaviness is not punishment. It is a signal. There are no easy steps for how to proceed. Start small. Tell one trusted person. Write it down. Look for evidence even when it makes you wince. Seek counsel. Ask how your truth will affect others, and who will be harmed by continued silence. Prepare for fallout. There will be a price to pay for speaking up. There will also be a long, slow healing that only honesty can begin. People sometimes ask me if forgiving my grandfather was possible. I am a man who has lived through grief and anger, and a long list of small mercies. Forgiveness is complicated. Maybe forgiveness is not the right word. Maybe what I found was acceptance, a reluctantly earned peace that lets me sleep without stitching lies between my breaths. Now, at 82, I keep the ledger no longer. It is evidence in a room where people talk about justice. My sister's health is fragile but steady. My family is broken and still standing. The town remembers the scandal like a scar, and also like a line in a story. People tell about how things changed. If you are listening, and you keep a secret because you think it protects someone, think again. Ask yourself who will be harmed by your silence a year from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. Secrets have timelines. So do consequences. This isn't a neat ending. I do not expect applause. I do not want pity. I want you to think. I want you to feel the weight of what I'm telling you. Because if my confession does one thing, I hope it makes someone braver than I was. If this story moved you, if it made you question something you have left unasked, then do something small but real. Talk to a person you trust. Write down the details you have been avoiding. If you are inspired to learn more about how secrets shape communities, look into cold case reviews and the ways truth is finally being given weight decades later. If you want more stories like this, true, raw, and told from the voice of someone who has lived with his choices, subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that silence can hurt. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, your questions, or your own experiences. I read every message. I do not promise to answer them all, but I promise they will be heard. Thank you for listening to an old man unburden himself. Thank you for staying until the end. And remember, truth is heavy, but silence is heavier. Choose the lighter road when you can. Choose courage. Choose truth.